Welcome to the Restoration Activation Project video commentary series. Hi, Mary Ann here, and thank you for joining me. Some fundamental causes of the regressed state of collective consciousness and the quality of conditions in this reality are the absence of misunderstandings around and/or non-co-creational alignment with objective truth-informed knowledge of self and reality. In this commentary, I'll be describing for your consideration a process that has helped me not only attune to increasingly higher level of awareness understandings, perspectives, and perceptions of self and reality, but deepened my desire to more fully attune to and embody to the greatest extent possible divine wisdom and will, while also increasing awareness of my innate faculties for doing so. Perhaps this process will help you too. So let's jump right in. The human soul, as well as other advanced being souls, are encoded to expand the whole of consciousness, expand and progress it through service to others driven co-creation that unfolds from ever increasing attunement to our inherent self-wholeness and fuller expression of our unique individuated consciousness. Progression encoded souls are imbued with an essence level desire to seek increasingly higher level awareness, understanding, and co-creational alignment with knowledge of higher order objective truths about ourselves and reality. However, humanity's innate curiosity around higher order truths about ourselves and reality has been severely suppressed. We've been engineered and entrained to be highly resistant to, if not downright fearful, of questioning what we've been told about these things. After millennia of such conditioning, collective desire to seek knowledge of higher order truths about self and reality has diminished greatly. I know many of you are aware of this. And consequently, most individuals accept without question the carefully crafted information that we've been spoon-fed. When we don't question everything we've been told about these things, we limit our ability to contribute to the progression of collective consciousness because we're inhibiting awareness of our inner knowing around these things and therefore the progression of our individuated consciousness. This is why it's critical that those of us who sincerely seek to fully attune to and co-creationally align with our encoded and unique purposes in this incarnation question everything. Now, if you've been on your journey for any length of time, you've likely come across the widely used admonition to, quote, forget everything you think you know, or some variation of that. Now, I wholeheartedly concur with that statement, except for one thing, and that's the forgetting part. So I say, my suggestion is that we question everything we think we know. Because humanity's forgetting of past experiences and our innate knowledge has contributed immensely to its current predicament. Rather than forgetting what we know when we acquire more accurate information, there are many ways that we can use the quote old information toward advancing our shadow work, trauma healing, distortion clearing, and other self-mastery advancement efforts. Many on a self-mastery journey, including myself, readily acknowledge that conscious, more focused seeking of higher order truths about self and reality and their true nature and purpose was set in motion as a result of intense pain, confusion, and other forms of suffering triggered by disillusionment. Now, excuse me, by definition, disillusionment is freedom from illusions. For example, freedom from false beliefs, from idealism, and from prescribed ideologies and dogmata, to name a few. So, disillusionment is what we're really seeking. On our quests for higher knowledge about self and reality. But because disillusionment is typically accompanied by self-doubt, often intense self-doubt sourced feelings of disappointment, anger, depression, confusion, and other fear-driven emotions arising from the realization that something isn't what it was expected or believed to be, and having our worldview challenged, if not completely turned upside down, many people equate disillusionment with suffering. The vast majority of our fears are rooted in self-doubt arising from false identifications and attachments sourced in identification with ego. In other words, identification with the false self. Yet these unpleasant emotions reveal these identifications and attachments to us, thereby giving us the opportunity to free ourselves of them. If you haven't already done so, I invite you to watch a previous commentary entitled The Labyrinth of False Identifications that dives deeply into the underlying causes for collective immersion in that self-regressing maze of illusions. So, we can reasonably say that seeking increasingly higher level awareness, understanding, and co-creational alignment with knowledge of higher order truths about ourself and reality is synonymous with seeking disillusionment. Disillusionment is a good thing. When we engage in conscious inquiry, however we go about it, with the intention of attuning to and applying higher order knowledge in our day-to-day co-creational choices, we expedite our efforts to more fully attune to and co-creationally align with our encoded and unique purposes. The more we exist and co-create in harmony with divine core self wisdom and will, the more we contribute to the progression of the whole of consciousness. But what kinds of things do we question? Well, obviously, you can, and it's probably a good idea to question and investigate anything you feel inclined to. But in addition to those things, I'm going to put forth for your consideration a certain type or category of things that through sincere, what I call holistic inquiry, enables significant progress on my own journey. These kinds of things have two basic characteristics in common. They're usually either givens, Givens, or sacred cows, and I'll explain those two terms in a minute, and they're primary influences of our beliefs, perspectives, perceptions, and therefore our states of being and co-creational choices. Now, a given is something that's taken for granted based on deeply instilled assumptions. In other words, givens are the kinds of things that are right under our noses, so to speak, and therefore it typically doesn't occur to us to question them. A sacred cow is similar, but a little bit different. A sacred cow is something that's often viewed as being, quote, immune from criticism, opposition, or questioning. Now, the term sacred cow derives from the honored status of cows in Hinduism, where they're seen as symbols of God's generosity to humanity. And in a little bit, I'm going to give some specific examples of givens and sacred cows. Holistic inquiry enables us to question and investigate something from multiple perspectives, thereby providing us and higher level perspectives, thereby providing us with a much more accurate understanding and perception of it. And the holistic inquiry process basically begins by first becoming, what do we want to question and investigate? But make a few notes around, take a few minutes to identify and clarify what you currently think you know about that thing. And of course, many don't take the time to do that, and they only become aware of their current beliefs and thinking around a thing when they are in the process of questioning, investigating something. But that's just a tip that will be of help. Make a few notes around what you believe or think you know about a thing before you start investigating. And sometimes we don't have that opportunity because we just encounter information. It comes into our fields of awareness beyond, a conscious investigation of a thing. Holistic inquiry entails seeking both outward and attuning inward for knowledge of the truth of a thing. Knowledge that very often challenges what we think we know. But this is how we stretch and expand our consciousness and bring our awareness to increasingly higher level, bigger picture, and thus more, quote, accurate perspectives of self and reality. And it's important that we view our current understandings as well as the various theories and other assertions around self and reality that we deem as somewhat accurate, at least somewhat accurate, and are therefore functioning through them. It's really important that we view them as rungs on a never-ending ladder, the steps on a never-ending ladder to increasingly higher level awareness, knowledge of higher order truths about ourselves and reality. Taking this approach helps us avoid becoming identified with or attached to those understandings, which only limits our rates of progression. So how do we go about gauging the plausibility or implausibility of either our current or, quote, newly encountered higher order knowledge of self and reality? Well, the process and work of holistic inquiry revolves around working from an objective truth-informed knowledge base that enables us to hone our faculties for discerning truth from illusion by way of honing our cognitive as well as intuitive faculties. This knowledge base comprises, but by no means needs to be limited to, baseline awareness and understanding of 7 key areas of objective truth-informed knowledge that we already have access to. That first area and key source, the most important source of objective truth-informed knowledge, is inner knowing. In other words, innate soul and core self-source knowledge of self and reality, received by way of intuition and gnosis, which, by the way, are completely different from ego or instinct-sourced emotional reactions to others, situations, or information that are often referred to as gut feelings. In other words, gnosis and intuition are not a 5-sensory experience in and of themselves. They don't come to us by way of the 5 senses. Now, we can have, after the fact, 5-sensory reactions to intuition and gnosis. The way I define or describe my own intuition and experiences, well, not experiences, but impressions of gnosis, they are just that. They're this glint, this click, this switch gets turned on, and you just know a thing. Or I've many times had the experience of, after the fact, knowing that I just received what sometimes are really big impressions that take some time for me to even begin processing as a thought or concept, information. But I'm very aware of when those impressions occur. And sometimes it is just a quick, instant knowing about something, a person, a situation that you just witnessed, an event, circumstances in your own life. Holistic inquiry applied as part of sincere efforts toward self-mastery attainment facilitates greater apperception and transduction of intuition. That's one of the beauties of this process that I'm laying out for you. It heightens intuition and your intuitive faculties. The next area of objective truth-informed knowledge, comprising the holistic inquiry, quote, knowledge base, is the inbuilt operating principles of this reality. The principles of creation, as I call them, others refer to them as universal or natural law. The more we study, contemplate, and observe, not just around us in our lives and the greater reality, but within ourselves, and attain increasingly deeper understandings of these principles, the more they become these amazing gauges of the implausibility or plausibility of information we encounter, and even our currently held understandings. The next area is knowledge of the progression framed co-creational code of conduct for this reality. It's inbuilt. And there are many different interpretations and names for this code, these rules of engagement. They've been referred to within Christianity as the Ten Commandments. Others might know them as related to that would be the seven deadly sins. Some of you would know them, think of them as the law of cause and effect, the karma, the golden rule. But in the Self-Mastery Guidebook, I present a code of conduct that's derived from the various codes of conduct across multiple cultures and religions, that contain seeds of truth, and distill them into 7 clearly delineated rules of engagement, my interpretation, that were inbuilt into this reality. So understanding, becoming very familiar with and understanding and developing your own intuition-guided interpretations of that code. The next area of knowledge relates to awareness and understanding around the differences, first of all, the innate qualities, the 2 baseline qualities of the whole of unexpressed consciousness, from which all manifest expressions of consciousness unfold, are the differences between regressive and progressive qualities of consciousness, and regressive and progressive co-creation. Now, it's also extremely helpful to understand that as a subset of the two qualities of consciousness, regressive and progressive, that each of those qualities of consciousness comprise both masculine and feminine characteristics. The next area of knowledge that comprises a holistic inquiry knowledge base is knowledge around an understanding that we exist and co-create through 4 layers of our being. The physical layer, that's the material, biological, atomic level of existence and co-creation. The mental, psychological layer, which comprises thought, emotion, and conscious, subconscious mind level of existence and co-creation. The energetic, metaphysical layer, comprising our various ratios of unique ratios of life force and density energy, and the interdensity dimension levels of existence and co-creation. In other words, we exist within all of the energetic layers of this reality and beyond. And the 4th layer of our being, being the source or essence layer. That layer comprises our unique individuated consciousness, in other words, soul, that is an extension of our unique individuated core self-consciousness, arising, that's our, quote, access to divine consciousness, the whole of divine consciousness, and the whole of consciousness level of our existence. That we are part of this whole unfoldment, this one movement. Within consciousness. So the more we understand about the different layers at which the different layers of our being and levels of existence through which we co-create. In other words, even though we're not aware of it, may not be aware of it, we're co-creating not only at the material layer of being, but at the psychological, energetic, and soul layer of our being with every choice that we make. The next area of the knowledge base is knowledge and understanding of the regressive dominant state of collective consciousness and the quality of conditions in this reality. Unless we understand deeply that that is the case, then we're automatically at a consciousness expansion disadvantage when it comes to conscious inquiry, because we're in denial of the truth of what is in this reality. And the 7 key area of knowledge comprising the holistic inquiry knowledge base is knowledge and understanding of the interdensity dimensional system of control in this simulation of our reality and its purpose. again, we're put at a distinct disadvantage in terms of soul's evolution in ignorance of this interdensity dimensional system of control and why it's in place, how it came to be. Now, in addition to honing our faculties for discerning truth from illusion, along with our intuitive and cognitive faculties such as logic, reasoning, concentration, and contemplation, another beautiful unfoldment that arises from referring to this knowledge base in our inquiries is that we deepen our understandings within each of the areas that comprise that knowledge base. In other words, we come to deeper understandings of the inbuilt principles of creation and the progression framed co-creational code of conduct, the differences between progressive and regressive qualities of consciousness and co-creation, the four layers of our being. The more we use that knowledge base to advance and support us in our conscious inquiries, the more familiar with, the more we deeper our understandings of these objective truth informed areas of knowledge. Now, to help ensure that our inquiries are as unbiased as possible, it's essential that we observe others and information from a particular point of view. And I've mentioned this in many other commentaries. And that view is the non-emotionally, non-intellectually invested perspective of the objective observer. If we're sincerely seeking higher order knowledge of truth and knowledge of higher order truths, it's really important that we set aside, not suppress or bury or pretend like they're not there, but to, for the moment when we're performing our inquiries, that we set aside our emotions and our current assumptions, our current beliefs, likes and dislikes, and our current interpretations and opinions. The objective observer perspective facilitates our ability to distinguish information from the individual who's providing it, if that's the case. In other words, people that make us feel good aren't necessarily purveyors of truth. And information that makes us feel good isn't by default true. Conversely, people who trigger annoyance, anger, or other such feelings within us aren't necessarily purveyors of deception and falsehoods. And information that makes us feel the same way isn't necessarily false. Negative feelings and reactions can be triggered by shadow aspects of ourselves that we're unaware of or refuse to accept and therefore project onto others, as well as by intellectual or emotional bias or unhealed wounds or trauma that caused us to become identified with and attached to our current beliefs about ourselves, others, and reality, which in turn have colored our perspectives and perceptions. The objective observer perspective is a key component of non-biased holistic inquiry because it enables us to maintain awareness of our emotional reactions to information and those who are presenting it without becoming emotionally entangled with either one. So the objective observer perspective is crucial. It's integral to this process, the process of unbiased inquiry. Now, a few examples of givens that are key foundational influencers of our co-creational choices are our beliefs. Have you ever taken time to identify and look at your beliefs around any number of things and to ask yourself where that belief came from? Is it based on intuition? Or is that belief based in the information of others that you've just accepted, likely for a large part of your life? So, a belief is an example of a given. The kinds of things that are right under our noses that we typically don't question. Thoughts and emotions. What are thoughts? What are emotions? Really? Where do they come from? Why do we have certain thoughts and emotions? Are the thoughts and physical sensations that we call emotions what we've been told that they are? And if not, what are they? Have we always had them? The kinds of questions, just let your mind wander. Go deep. Another given is the ego. Most individuals think of ego strictly in terms of the psychology-based theory of ego within the framework of psyche, but it's all theory-based. And this is another helpful tip when it comes to sincere, conscious, holistic inquiry, is that based on, if you have a good, solid understanding of the regressive dominant state of human, collective consciousness and the quality of conditions of this reality, and the differences between regressive and progressive qualities of consciousness and co-creation, and therefore some understanding of the nature of the non-human and human beings who currently hold sway over this reality, then the most heavily promulgated, the most deeply entrenched theories, concepts, the most widespread universally accepted concepts are typically inversions of truth. They're deeply distorted notions and interpretations of what we in reality are. Again, the more widely, deeply, intensely promulgated, widely accepted the given or sacred cow, the more likely it is a complete inversion of what that thing really is. Deep distortion. So you can count on that. That's a truth. Because it is those very things that have such influence over our states of being and therefore our co-creational choices that they have manipulated, that they have, that are based on in falsehoods. That's why they're based in falsehoods, because these things that I'm talking about, these kinds of givens, are the things that most heavily influence our choices, the way we co-create. Another given is exploring the mind, investigating what the mind really is, what you think you know about the mind, and what it might really be. And with perhaps particular attention around the subconscious layer of mind. Again, psychology-based theories of the conscious subconscious mind schism put forth in the same way that they speak to the ego, that this is an inherent aspect of the human psyche, that it's just there. It always has been, always will be. These are the kinds of things to question that will enable oftentimes great leaps to higher, substantially higher level awareness, understandings, and perspectives of self and this reality. Another example of a given is the mind-body complex. To question, aside from the widely promulgated, deeply, widely accepted baseline theories of, Darwin's theory of evolution around mind-body complex, as well as some of the most heavily promulgated theories around creationism, because those are the two basic ideological camps around the origins of man and humanity. Now, let's look at some examples of sacred cows. As I just touched on, Darwin's theory of evolution and creationism theories are really excellent things to delve deeply into. The soul. What you think you know about the soul. People, the soul is a widely accepted concept. But what is your own interpretation of what the soul is? Is it aligned exactly with what you've been told about soul? Same thing with core self or spirit, or whatever name you assign to your essence layer being. But to Step outside of everything you've been told about these things and attune to inner knowing and run what you know past the 7 areas of knowledge, these that comprise holistic inquiry. More examples of sacred cows are, and these are some biggies, the reincarnation cycle, chakras, not just human origins, but the origins of cultures, going back to the ancient cultures. Where did they come from? We're taught that all cultures, even the most ancient, are human originated. That's deeply entrained. That's a big, both a given and a sacred cow. So, keeping in mind what I said earlier about the most widely promulgated, widely accepted theories as being distortions of the truth, if not outright inversions of truth, question the various cultures and their origins. Whether it's ancient Egypt, Sumer, and some of the various other ancient cultures, Mayan cultures, and there's many others that are more ancient than that. Look into some of their beliefs, the practices, their teachings, and some of the rituals of these cultures and their religious or spiritual teachings. For example, virtually every, if not all, ancient cultures embodied various offering and participated in various offering and sacrificial rituals to appease the gods. Killing, saying that they were instructed by the gods to kill or to make these offerings. Now, archaeologists and anthropologists, again, widely promulgated concepts that these things were done in ignorance. Humans were just not very bright back then, despite the advanced nature of the culture that they've been exploring. They turn around and say, well, humans weren't very smart. They had all these superstitions and yada, yada, yada. Question that. Now, in terms of using those, the knowledge base that I described earlier, how would we apply that? How do we use that knowledge base to help us gauge the plausibility or implausibility of a particular theory or assertion that we've encountered, or our own current understandings around such things? Okay, let's take one here. the very popular concept, assertion around, and most of you are already hip to the falsehood of this notion, but the New Age notion, and beyond the New Age community. This isn't just a New Age notion, it goes beyond that. But the assertion that all aliens are benevolent, they're good and benevolent. Well, if you've been on the planet any length of time and you have any sense of how things work, then that's an easy assertion to debunk. In terms of understanding the innate regressive and progressive qualities of consciousness, and therefore each life form that becomes manifest must by default comprise both qualities. And that you're going to, among those unique expressions of individuated consciousness with their unique ratios of regressive to progressive qualities, that some of those individuals are going to be extremely regressive dominant and extremely progressive dominant. Therefore, just using that one area of knowledge, we can that assertion is easily debunked. Another example, another New Age assertion, that ascension, the New Age ascension process, that whole process, and that the goal being to transition to the very popular fifth dimension. And that within that dimension, everything's going to be just fine, thank you. No, life will be easy. Well, because we exist in this reality, and if you understand the principle of correspondence, the 4 layers of our being, and the 4 planes of existence, then aspects of ourselves are already co-creating, although it's almost 100% unconsciously, within the different density dimensions of this reality. And that, going back to the understandings of the regressive and progressive qualities of consciousness, that no one realm, density dimension, or any reality is either 100% progressive. In other words, there's no such thing as a paradise or a quote hell per se. I'm talking in terms of 100% progressive or 100% regressive dominant energies. If you understand the interconnectedness of everything within reality, and you understand, again, the principle of correspondence, then you would understand that there is no density dimension of this reality that is not a part of the system of control that exists herein. As above, so below. As below, so above. So there is no density dimension, realm within a realm of this reality that is not a part of the system of control in this reality. So those are just a couple of examples that I've just barely scratched the surface of in terms of taking the information, whether your own current interpretations and understandings or new information, quote, newly encountered information that you come across, and holding them up to this knowledge base, first and foremost, with your intuition that you already have access to. Oftentimes, when you've assumed the detached, non-emotionally or intellectually biased perspective of the objective observer, when you're in that place, then your intuition around information that you encounter can flow, can come to you more freely. That's the other beauty of the detached observer perspective. You're clearing the way by putting aside your emotions, your opinions, your likes or dislikes, your current interpretations. Just putting them aside. You clear a pathway. The more you do this, the more clear the pathway becomes, and you are able to free up. You enable intuition to arise within you. Your inner knowing. You're able to more, perceive when you do receive intuitive impressions. Many of us, many individuals have a very strong sense of intuition, but over the course of their lives, it's become so suppressed within and through them that they don't even believe that they have or understand what intuition really is and the implications of intuition. So this entire process facilitates all the key areas of our, some very key areas of our self-mastery attainment work, self-work. As I said earlier, when we encounter new information that throws us for a loop, when we look back at, assuming that you've assumed the objective observer point of view, but you've made note of your emotional bodily reactions to that information or that person purveying it, then you can use those reactions to point you. They'll reveal the particular false beliefs that you've been holding, first and foremost. But beyond that, the false identifications and attachments that cause self-doubt and therefore suffering in our disillusionment, and can be used to they reveal to us not only that we have these false identifications and attachments, but the extent to which we are identified with and attached to them. And that we can turn that information and use it to advance, as I mentioned earlier, our shadow work, and clear our distortions, our false beliefs, which frees these energy blockages that we've created within ourselves, thus enabling core self-consciousness, wisdom, and will to flow through us. We're able to more fully transduce it, which means we are more open to being able to apperceive and interpret accurately intuition. So, although it might seem initially to be a bit of a cumbersome process, after you've used this, it doesn't take too many times. You get into the flow of it. You're able to do this. It is not, quote, an effort. It becomes virtually effortless to just get in the flow of using this holistic process of inquiry or your own. The key thing being that you are gauging your current knowledge as well as newly encountered knowledge, information, against various objective, truth-informed knowledge and interpretations. On that note, I'm going to call it a wrap. If you find this information to be helpful on your own journey, and you haven't already done so, I invite you to subscribe to either my YouTube channel or on my website, where you will not only be notified of new commentaries as they're released, but also when various online courses and programs that I'm currently working on will be released. Also, if you haven't already checked it out or purchased the Self-Mastery Guidebook, then I encourage you to seriously consider doing so if you are benefiting from these commentaries. And the most beneficial thing is to actually experiment with what I'm talking about, the information that I provide. If you just reject it out of hand, who's rejecting it? Core self, soul, or ego? But the Self-Mastery Guidebook and these commentaries complement the information. They complement each other, both helping you really increase, when used in combination, the information to accelerate your rate of progress on your unique journey at this critical turning point in the evolution of human consciousness. Until next time, stay true to self, and your unique journey, and take care on your journey. Bye for now.